In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. Good evening and welcome everyone to our 17th annual Lenten Lecture Series, St. George Greek Orthodox Church here in St. Paul, Minnesota. As you all know, I'm Father Richard Demetrius Andrews, and our Wednesday evening theme this year is virtual pilgrimage. And as I've said, as you've probably heard many times so far, a pilgrim is not only an early settler from England or North America. For 2,000 years, pilgrims have been journeying to the most holy city of Jerusalem and its environment. And building on previous presentations about significant destinations in the Holy Land, I will continue to share the sights and sounds and history of this special place from our recent trip in this fall of 2017, including sites in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Galilee, and St. Petersburg, Russia, which will be next week, our last presentation. And I'd like to welcome Father Tom Rudquist with us, Father Tom. Tom Rudquist, who was instrumental in organizing our trip last fall and helped lead us throughout that trip. So welcome, Tom. And if you are inspired after watching these presentations, you can talk to Tom because he's organizing another trip this coming September. So, all right, so as I mentioned before, we did a large presentation last December on the Holy Sepulchre, on Nativity Church in Bethlehem, and the Church of Jacob's Well, where the Samaritan woman met Jacob. And then in our Lenten lectures, we've covered already the Jerusalem Patriarchate, the Church of St. Peter of Balakantu, both in Jerusalem. We've covered the sites at the Garden of Gethsemane, as well as the Stations of the Cross and the Praetorium, also in Jerusalem. And then last week, we covered the Shepherd's Field in Bethlehem and the Annunciation Church in Nazareth, as well as the home of Joseph, or Jesus' home in Nazareth. So tonight, March 14th, we're going to talk about the area in and around the Sea of Galilee, including Capernaum, Abga, and the Jordan River. So, again, this may be a little bit of review, but just for reference, this, of course, is a map of Europe and the Mediterranean and North Africa. And you see Spain here, Italy, Greece, and on the eastern end of the Mediterranean, you see the Middle East here. And a little tiny country there is Israel and Palestine. And if we go in a little closer here, we're looking just at Israel and Palestine. Israel is kind of the beige color, and the West Bank, Palestine, is the green color here. And this is Jerusalem right here in the middle. And Bethlehem is just a few miles to the south. Last week we were talking about the area, the sites in and around Nazareth. And tonight we're going to be talking about the area in and around the Sea of Galilee here. Okay? So looking a little bit closer, you can see here, just right up in the very corner here is the Sea of Galilee. And just for reference, if we have time, we're going to talk a little bit about the alternate site of the baptism of Jesus. There's two sites that are, let's say, considered by some to be a valid location of Jesus' baptism. One is at the south end of the Sea of Galilee, down here, and one is on the Jordan River, way down here next to Jericho in the desert. Okay, so this is a little bit closer look at the Sea of Galilee area, and Tiberias is really the modern city. It's kind of a resort town, if you will. You see Nazareth over here, where we talked about last week. Mount Tabor, where Jesus was transfigured, here. And then the area we're going to focus on is Capernaum, in and around Capernaum here. You see Magdala is a town here. That's, of course, where that's probably where Mary Magdalene was from, Mary of Magdala. And this is take a little farther view out, more or less the same area. So, I don't know what's more helpful, to look at photos first and then hear the story, or listen to some of the story and history and then look at the photos. So I'll try it with just talking a little bit about the history first. So let's talk about Capernaum. Capernaum, which is from the Arabic Kafar Nahum, was a fishing village established during the time of the Hasmoneans, located on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. It had a population of about 1,500 people. Archaeological excavations have revealed two ancient synagogues built one over the other. A house turned into a church by the Byzantines is said to be the home of St. Peter. The village was inhabited continuously from the 2nd century BC to the 11th century AD, when it was abandoned sometime before the Crusader conquest. This includes the re-establishment of the village during the early Islamic period, soon after the earthquake that took place in the year 749 AD. The eastern half of Capernaum is where the Greek Orthodox Church of the Seven Apostles stands and is owned by an Orthodox monastery. It was surveyed and partially excavated under the direction of Vasilios Tsaferas. This section has uncovered the village from the Byzantine and early Arab periods. Features include a pool apparently used for the processing of fish and a hoard of gold coins. Now, we didn't go to the Greek Orthodox Church at Capernaum. We went to the other site. But I do have some photos that I'll show you to give you a little idea of what is there. The first thing that we're going to look at Capernaum is the remains of the synagogue that I just mentioned, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more detail about that synagogue right now. The ruins of this building, among the oldest synagogues in the world, were identified by Charles L. William Wilson. The large, ornately carved white building stones of the synagogue stood out prominently among the smaller, plain blocks of local black basalt used for the town's other buildings, which were almost all residential, in other words, family homes. The synagogue was built almost entirely of white blocks of calcareous stone brought from distant quarries. You'll see that difference in just a moment. The building, the synagogue, consisted of 4 parts: the hall for prayer, the western patio, a southern balustrade, and a small room at the northwest of the building. The prayer hall measured 24 meters, so that's about 76 feet, by 18 meters, which is approximately a little less than 60 feet, with the southern face looking towards Jerusalem. The synagogue appears to have been built around the 4th or 5th century. Beneath the foundation of this synagogue lies another foundation made of basalt, and Lofreda suggests that this is the foundation of a synagogue from the 1st century, perhaps the one mentioned in the Gospels. Later excavation work was attempted underneath the synagogue floor, but there was some debate if it was actually another synagogue floor or if it was just a paved market area. The ancient synagogue has 2 inscriptions, one in Greek and the other in Aramaic, that commemorates the benefactors that helped in the construction of the building. There are also carvings of 5 and 6-pointed stars and palm trees. In the year 1926, the Franciscan father Gaudenzio Orfali began the restoration of the synagogue. The work was interrupted by his death in a car accident in 1926 and was continued by Virgilio Corbo beginning in 1976. So very recent restoration. So let's take a look at the synagogue in Capernaum. So here we have a little sign letting us know where we're going. And that's our pilgrim group walking into the gate that kind of encloses that area. And this is, now I didn't take this photo myself, but it is a nice aerial view, and it shows the gate that we were walking towards is approximately here. The synagogue remains are here. Notice the white stone. And then the basalt residential ruins are around here on the edge, or surrounding it. Now this thing that looks like kind of like a spaceship is the modern Catholic church that's built over the house of Peter. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. Of course, you see in the background here the Sea of Galilee. So here's another view kind of almost from the opposite direction. You see the white stones of the synagogue remaining, and you see the spaceship Catholic church. And then this is a rendering of what it might have looked like in the 4th or 5th century, or perhaps even earlier. The buildings, how the buildings would have looked. They were all one-story dwellings, probably wood or thatch roofs, stone walls. You see this larger synagogue in the middle. And then this probably is considered to be the house of Peter, which was not long after Jesus was turned into a church. And then, of course, you have the piers here with the boats. Okay, so here's another aerial view of the synagogue, a little closer look with the remains of the homes, buildings around it. And then this is a interpretive sign that tells a little bit more about the history and some more detailed schematics. This is kind of what the synagogue would have looked like when it was built. So there's a little bit closer look. Now this side, actually, one of our pilgrims took these photos where we're on the ground, kind of walking around the synagogue and through this area. So notice the synagogue is more or less incorporating what you might call classical Greek architecture, columns, and so forth. So it should show kind of the heavy Hellenistic influence of the area, Greek speaking as well as speaking Aramaic or Hebrew. This is another look across the ruins of the residential homes. And there you see the marked difference between the basalt, the darker stone, underneath the lighter blocks of the synagogue. This may be that archaeological feature, could be a baptismal font. I can't remember. Or it's an early hot tub. In the distance there, you can see the red dome of the Greek Orthodox Church in Capernaum, which we were not able to go to. And again, it's difficult to communicate to the, how would you say it, maybe the aura that you feel when you're walking through these ruins that are well over 1,500 years old, and knowing that this is, Galilee is the home, if you will, the home district of Jesus, and this is where he began his earthly ministry after his baptism. This is where a lot of the miracles and the teachings and everything else that you hear about occurred. Okay, so now we're coming to we'll talk about the house of St. Peter. So one block of homes called by the Franciscan excavators the Sacra Insula, or Holy Insula, and the word insula refers to a block of homes around a courtyard, was found to have a complex history. Located between the synagogue and the lakeshore, it was found near the front of a labyrinth of houses from many different periods. 3 principal layers have been identified. Number 1, a group of private houses built around the 1st century BC, which remained in use until the early 4th century, so almost 500 years. Number 2, the great transformation of one of the homes in the 4th century. And number 3, the octagonal church in the middle of the 5th century. The excavators concluded that one house in the village was venerated as the house of Peter the fisherman as early as the mid-1st century, with 2 churches having been constructed over it. So, the 4th century transformation of this area says that one particular room that had before been treated differently was profoundly altered and expanded. A central archway was added to support a roof, and the north wall was strengthened with mortar. The structure remained until the middle of the 5th century, when the sacred insula was dismantled and replaced with a larger basilica. And in the 5th century, that basilica, the octagonal church, had 8 pillars. It had an apse with a pool for baptism in the middle of the east wall. And the Byzantines, who constructed the new church, placed the central octagon directly on top of the walls of St. Peter's original home, with the aim of preserving its exact location. Although none of the original house was visible any longer, as the walls had been torn down and the floor covered in mosaics. Now, the memorial, if you will, which is the Spaceship Church, was built around 1990. A modern shrine built above the excavated remains of the ancient house and the Byzantine octagonal church, dedicated in 1990. This disc-shaped structure stands on concrete stilts, ensuring visibility to the venerated ancient building below it. Additionally, a glass floor located at the center of the church allows direct view of the excavated remains below. So, as we've talked about before, what happened to the 5th century octagonal basilica that was built? Well, some say it was that earthquake in 749 that destroyed it, but more than likely it was the Persians that came through in the 7th century and destroyed all the churches in the Holy Land that led to its demise. So here's a sign noting that the memorial over the house of St. Peter is in the custody of the Holy Land is the Franciscan order, the Catholic order that protects most of the sites in the Holy Land, just like the Greek Orthodox have the Brotherhood of the Holy Sepulchre. So here's a view of kind of a side view of this church. I didn't really get too many good photos of this church. We didn't go in it, so most of this stuff you're seeing is stuff I pulled off the internet. Again, an aerial view, not much different than you saw earlier. This is kind of the home of St. Peter, and you can see how it might have looked in the 5th century. This is one of the mosaics that was found. Notice the peacock in the middle, and almost the whole mosaic floor looks like a peacock wing. Very ornate. And then again, interpretive displays that talks about the history and gives you an idea what it might look like, or at least the layout of the schematics. And then now this is looking under that spaceship church, so you're actually looking at the ruins here. A little different view. You notice, I don't know if you can see the patterns. These are mosaic floor here. See that? And then up above you see the concrete supports of the spaceship church above it, and the ruins below it. And it's surrounded by a fence. You can't walk into the ruins. That's kind of the same view as the other one. That's the synagogue. That's not the right place. Okay, so here's the inside of the church, and you see the glass floor looking down into the ruins. Another view. And another view. So this is a little bit of a schematic that would kind of tell you how some of these walls. So the inner octagon built over the house church and venerated room in St. Peter's house. So I'm guessing these blue, the dark blue is the original walls. The lighter blue is kind of what was constructed later in the 4th, 5th century. You see the apse and the baptistry on the east end here. Same interpretive display. So now this is the Greek Orthodox Church of the Seven Apostles that's right next door to the synagogue in Peter's home. So this is the outside, that's the inside. I wish we were able to go there. I hope, Tom, when you guys go there again, you'll be able to go. It's a very famous mosaic here. It's not a mosaic. I don't think it's an actual mural icon. And you see the scales of justice here. It's kind of an image of the Last Judgment. The river of fire here. See the scales here, and see the demon is trying to kind of weigh the scale towards his end, and the angels over here they're trying to weigh it to this end. See over here it says paradisos, paradise. Another view from the outside. Notice the sea in the background. Nice contrast of colors. And again, this is from the wall inside where the synagogue is, looking the other way. There's another view. Notice how the hills rise from the sea. It's not a flat land around the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so that is that area. So the next thing we're going to talk about, the next area we're going to go is not far away. It might even be if somebody had a strong arm within a rock throwing distance. Is the small, I don't know if you'd even call it a town, but it's called Tabga. Tabga. The Hebrew is In Sheva, which means spring of seven. It's an area situated on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. It is traditionally accepted as the place of the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes and the fourth resurrection appearance of Jesus after his crucifixion. Between the late Muslim period in 1948, it was the site of a Palestinian Arab village. The site's name is derived from the Greek name Heptapigon, or seven springs. Its pronunciation gradually changed to Tabego and was eventually changed to Tabga by the Arabic speakers. St. Jerome referred to Heptapigon as the solitude, eremos, desert area. In the Byzantine period, the water of the springs at Heptapigon was collected in 3 water towers and sent via an aqueduct to the plain of Ginosar, where it was used for irrigation. The three towers seem to be recorded in the mosaic floor of the 5th century Church of the Multiplication at Tabga. We might see that. A map from, this is interesting, a map from Napoleon's invasion in 1799 showed Tabga marked by the word moulin, which means mill in French. The 4th century tower-like octagonal reservoir and the aqueduct it connected to are traditionally attributed to Ali, the son of the 18th century ruler. The reservoir is locally known as Birket al-Ed Dahir, the pool of Ali Ed-Dahar. The Palestine Exploration Fund's 1881 survey of Western Palestine stated that the masonry of the structures indicates an Arab origin, thus agreeing with this tradition. Now, if you go back to the Crusader period, the area now taken by the Church of St. Peter's primacy, which we'll see right after this, was known during the Crusader period as Mensa Christi. The Ottoman period, not much to note there, and not much to note in the British Mandate period. But let's talk about the actual Church of the Multiplication. The Church of the Multiplication of loaves and fish was shortened to the Church of the Multiplication, is a Roman Catholic church located at Tabga on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee in Israel. The modern church rests on the site of two earlier churches. The 4th century church is the earliest recording of a church commemorating Jesus' feeding of the 5,000. And the reason we know about it is, how many of you have heard of the pilgrim Egeria? So her writings are being published now, but she was a pilgrim to the Holy Land in 380 AD. Right? It's 4th century. So what does she say? Not far away from here, meaning Capernaum, are some stone steps where the Lord stood, and in the same place by the sea is a grassy field with plenty of hay and many palm trees. By them are 7 springs, each flowing strongly. And this is the field where the Lord fed the people with the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. In fact, the stone on which the Lord placed the bread has now been made into an altar. Past the walls of the church goes the public highway on which the Apostle Matthew had his place of custom. Near there on a mountain is a cave to which the Savior climbed and spoke the Beatitudes. So let's start taking a look here. So this is the outside of the present-day Catholic Church. So there's kind of a courtyard area on the outside. And then there's the church of the 7 Springs. The interpretive display takes you through each of the centuries here that are significant. Shows you the present-day layout, and then the red would be the original or older church. So anybody know what the Via Maris is? So that's like the main road that went by there. So the red is the first church in the outline here. 2 is the venerated rock where Jesus actually multiplied the loaves and the fish. 3 is the modern church, these walls here. And number 4 is the altar with the rock of the bread and fish mosaic, which is right here. So now we're inside the church, and notice the altar here with the rock here. We'll get a little closer look. It's getting a little closer to the altar, the rock below it. This is a photo we took with our group inside the church. Nice Byzantine icons there. going back outside, this is a mill, grinding flour, other goods there, or maybe pressing olives. This is the pen that's more like an olive press. Okay, back inside the church. I don't know if you can see here in the mosaic floor the fish and the loaves right here. Okay, I thought I had these in order, jumping inside and outside, sorry. Okay, there's a better view of the mosaic, the fish and the loaves. And then this is what's really interesting. This is on the side. This is the original floor mosaic. Look at all the wildlife that is in the mosaic. We didn't, I don't know, either we didn't notice it, or because nobody took a photo of this, or I had to find this on the internet. That's a little, shows you the colors better here. And then there you see, like we've seen in other places, this glass floor that shows us something older beneath it. And then we're back outside again. Notice that the presses here are made out of that different type of rock, that basalt, darker rock. Okay. So just talking about the progression of the churches there after the 4th century. In the 5th century, the church was significantly enlarged around the year 480 AD, with floor mosaics added at this time. These renovations are attributed to the Patriarch Martyrius of Jerusalem. And of course, in AD 614, the Persians destroyed the Byzantine church. In the 19th and 20th century, okay, so after the destruction by the Persians in the 7th century, the exact site of the shrine was lost for some 1,300 years. In the year 1888, the site was acquired by the German Catholic Society for Palestine, which was associated with the Archdiocese of Cologne. An initial archaeological survey was conducted in 1892 with full excavations beginning in 1932. These excavations resulted in the discovery of mosaic floors from the 5th century church, which was also found to be built on the foundations of a much smaller 4th century chapel. And then in the 20th century, since 1939, the property has been administered by the Benedictine order as a daughter house of the Dormition Abbey in Jerusalem. The Germans have at first erected a provisional protective structure over the Holy Rock and the Byzantine mosaics. The current church, which was inaugurated in 1984, was built to the same floor plan as the 5th century Byzantine church. The windows are fitted with alabaster panels. The interior of the church has a central nave and 2 aisles. The sanctuary is backed by an apse with transepts on either side. Under the altar is a block of limestone found during excavation that is venerated as the stone on which the miraculous meal was laid. Regarding the mosaics, one of the main highlights of the church is its restored 5th century mosaics. These are the earliest known examples of figurative floor mosaics in Christian art in the Holy Land. Okay? The mosaics in the 2 transepts depict various wetland birds and plants, with a prominent place given to the lotus flower. This flower, which is not indigenous to the area, suggests the artist's use of the Lodic landscape popular in Roman and early Byzantine art. All other motifs depict plants and animals from Galilee. The mosaic found in front of the altar depicts 2 fish flanking a basket containing 4 loaves of bread. The 5th century remains were preserved in the modern church. They are a sill of the left entrance to the atrium, the basalt paving stones, and part of the apse frieze. The foundations of the original 4th century church can also be seen under a glass panel to the right of the altar. Basalt presses and a font are also displayed in the courtyard, which you just saw. Okay, so now let's go to the next site, which is, again, it's we were kind of zigzagging back and forth. but it's really not far at all from one place to another. But the Byzantine Church of or I should say the Catholic Church of St. Peter's Primacy. There we go. Okay, so what do we know about this area? The Church of the Primacy of St. Peter is a Franciscan church located in Tabga on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, and it commemorates the spot where Jesus reinstates Peter as chief among the apostles. And when he said, Peter, do you love me? 3 times. The modern structure was built in 1933 and incorporates parts of an earlier 4th century church. The base of its walls, opposite the main altar, foundations of the 4th century church are visible. In the 9th century, the church was referred to as the place of the coals, C-O-A-L-S. This name refers to the incident of Jesus' preparation of meal for the apostles, including a charcoal fire in which to cook the fish. Also first mentioned in the year 808 are the 12 thrones, a series of heart-shaped stones which were placed along the shore to commemorate the 12 apostles. The church survived longer than any other in the area, but was finally destroyed in the year 1263. The present Franciscan chapel was built on the site in 1933. This church was included in the itineraries of Pope Paul VI and John Paul II during their visits to Israel. The church contains a projection of limestone rock in front of the present altar, which is venerated as Mensa Christi, which is Latin for table of Christ. According to tradition, this is the spot where Jesus is said to have laid out a breakfast of bread and fish for the apostles and told Peter to feed my sheep. After the miraculous catch, the 3rd time he appeared to them after his resurrection. It is disputed whether the table or the one enshrined in the nearby Church of the Multiplication is the one mentioned by the pilgrim Egeria in her narrative of the Holy Land, which we just heard about. So let's take a look at some photos from this church. On the way there is a ruins, I think of a Byzantine structure. I'm not sure if it was a church or something else, or it was a fortification, but nevertheless, you can notice the black basalt stones that were used in its construction. And then you see the entrance into the area around the Church of Primacy of St. Peter. And then, as I pointed out before, this banner was appearing all over the place. It's the 2017 was the 800-year anniversary of the Franciscan Order Custodia Terra Sancta in the Holy Land. Terra Sancta means Holy Land. So this is the outside of that church, built in 1933. It also uses that basalt along with some other stones. So you see the Sea of Galilee in the background. Then you go inside the church, and this is that original rock, or it's Mensa Christi, the table of Christ, where he laid out this meal. And you can see how the church is kind of built around the rock itself. Another view. Closer up. And then this is outside. There's this statue, a somewhat modern statue of Jesus with Peter. Do you love me? 3 times. Feed my sheep 3 times. And then this is now kind of from the sea itself, looking towards the church. And I grabbed, notice where this is kind of a rocky, pebbly beach area here leading to the water. Notice that grayish stone, so those, it's probably larger boulders have been ground down. But notice there's no water here. And a closer look at the church. Again, these are photos we took. There's one of those heart-shaped stones. Okay, where'd that photo? No. Well, hopefully I have that. I know I have that photo where it went. But anyways, afterwards we went to St. Peter's restaurant. So I just include these photos because it's a little novel. Let's have this kind of, these holy destinations, holy sites, and then got a very commercial restaurant in the middle of it. Large restaurant serves the famous St. Peter's fish, which comes from the Sea of Galilee. Some of us didn't have the fish. Some of us had other food, but there's the fish, what it looks like. And they serve it whole. There's another heart-shaped stone. That's one I want to look at. Where the water is here. Look at how close it is to the church. They did talk about the water, some of the issues they're having with water supply there. Okay, so that's this area. So now we're going to talk about the Jordan River, or the place of Jesus' baptism. And I'm first going to talk about the place we actually went, which is called Yardanet. So the Jordan River, of course, is a 250-kilometer long river in the Middle East that flows roughly north to south through the Sea of Galilee and onto the Dead Sea. Jordan and the Golan Heights border the river to the east, while the West Bank of Israel lie to its west. Both Jordan and the West Bank take their names from the river. The river has a major significance in Judaism and Christianity, of course. This is the site where the Israelites crossed into the Promised Land and where Jesus of Nazareth was baptized by John the Baptist. Now, in Yardanet, get out of this part, go to Jordan River. This is the other one. I'll just tell you right now that this is the alternative site that's more close to Jericho. We did not go here. It's called Al-Magdas. And this is, some say this is really the true site of Jesus' baptism. Unfortunately, it's not as well frequented because the money wasn't poured into it to make it commercially accessible and as appealing as the other site that we did go to. And they are quite a ways apart because anyways. So when you come, as you're walking into Yardanet, they have inscriptions in many different languages about the baptism of Jesus as it's recorded in Mark chapter 1. So I just took a photo of the Greek one here. English one, and then it says this is where you actually enter into the building and you pay a little fee to go to the site. Welcome to Yardanet, the baptismal site on the Jordan River. And then you go in, and this is kind of what it looks like. It's the water has a greenish hue to it, and it's surrounded by lots of trees. So it's fairly picturesque. So then they have, and it's very, again, as I was mentioning, they've made it very accessible to walk down into the water. So it's very easy to go down the steps, and the steps gradually descend into the water. So if you want to go ankle deep, or if you want to go calf deep, or knee deep, or however deep you want to go, there's a step for you. But this is some of our group here. Lisa Rudquist, Tom's daughter-in-law, his grandson here, Angie Quintanacos, Chris Jane. And what we're doing is there's little fish in the water, and when you put your feet in the water, the fish come up and they nibble your feet. And so everybody's noticing that. And this is looking, I can't remember if that's upriver or downriver, but they have kind of, you see the gating here that's kind of meant to keep people from going in the deep water. So while we were there, which is quite common, you see groups of pilgrims coming and they are being baptized in the river. Well, many of those groups are Protestant groups, because of course Orthodox and Catholic don't believe in rebaptism. But I think they either rent or sell these baptismal robes you can put on for that purpose. And then I don't know if you can see the fish here. This looks like a little video. As I said, densely with vegetation. There's some big, larger fish there, if you can see them under the water. About the same, more fish. Big catfish looks like there. There's me wading ankle deep. And you wade, it doesn't take very long, but you just feel there'll be like a lot of fish nibbling on your, they like our scaly dead skin, I guess. It's another form of exfoliation, I guess. Okay, so these might be the photos of the, so I'll just tell you a little bit about Yardenette. Yardenette, also known as Yardenette Baptismal Site, is a baptism site located along the Jordan River in Galilee region of northern Israel, which is frequented by Christian pilgrims. The site is located south of the river's outlet from the Sea of Galilee near the Kibbutz Kinneret, which owns and manages the site. After the Six-Day War, this fell under Israeli occupation, and due to military activity and excavations, the Israeli Ministry of Tourism established Yardenette in 1981 as an alternative pilgrimage site. So in other words, there was already a pilgrimage site, and they said we're going to develop an alternate one. Yardenette became the first regulated baptism site on the Israeli side of the river, and but in 2015, UNESCO, the World Heritage Commission, declared Al-Maqdas, which is probably the original authentic site, together with Jabar Ma'Elias, Elijah's Hill on the East Bank, as a World Heritage Site. The Yardenette baptismal site currently averages 400,000 visitors a year and attracts members of all faiths. A little bit about Al-Maqdas, which is after the signing of the Israeli-Jordan Peace Treaty in 1994, demining, in other words, they had to take out landmines, of the area soon took place after an initiative of Jordanian royalty, namely Prince Ghazi. The site has then seen several archaeological digs, 4 papal visits and state visits, and attracts tourists and pilgrimage activity. In 2015, the site was designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, excluding the western side of the river. Approximately 81,000 people visited the site in 2016, mostly European, American, and Arab tourists. Thousands flocked to the site on January 6 to mark Epiphany. So you can see the difference in terms of the number of pilgrims. So let's show you, see if I have a couple. There's some photos here. It seems to be kind of an inlet of the river, and depending on the height of the river, depends on how much water is in here. But again, it's difficult to say because we weren't there. But I thought I'd show it to you since it probably is the more authentic site. There is a church built there, and it's a Greek Orthodox church and a Greek Orthodox site that kind of control, if you will. So, what time is it? So we have a few minutes left. Anybody have any questions? So I was trying to, I think there was maybe one, if you're interested, I can show you a couple of the things. These were the things that seem to have the most significance, most interest, and the most to look at in terms of photos. There are some sites that we just didn't cover. We weren't able, just couldn't do it all in this Lenten lecture series. I'm sorry? We did go there, so I can show you, I do have some photos there. Okay, so the Mount of Beatitudes is the place where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, and including the 8 Beatitudes. And this is the Church of Beatitudes, and this is a Catholic-controlled site. So this is the outside of the church. And then there's kind of a veranda, what you call it, veranda that kind of surrounds the church with these columns. So it's a shaded veranda that goes around the exterior of the church. And then I think that's above the door of the church. Notice kind of the Western style religious art. And then inside here is the altar. And then up into the dome, they have a gold dome up above with these stained glass windows. There's 8 of them for each beatitude, and I think they're rendered in Latin. And this commemorates the 1964 visit of Pope Paul VI. And then from the veranda, you can have a very good view of the Sea of Galilee. And this is, it's a good view of the veranda. So it's an octagonal church, 8 sides for the 8 Beatitudes. Notice the dark basalt rock and mixed with a lighter colored stone. There's people you might know. John and Debbie Pound, Angie. And that's looking down to the shore. Looking the other way. Some of the iron gate work. Again, the inside of the church. The dome. There's a good view of the part of the 8 windows. Another view. It's kind of a panoramic. So they have very nicely kept gardens and lawns there. And then on the walkway, as you go in and out, there's this rock garden. You see the fish there with the dark stone amongst the light stone. Notice the 2 fish and loaves up here. We didn't get this view, so I took this off the internet, because this is more looking from the sea towards the church. And that's also off the internet. We walk looking towards the sea. And that's all the photos I have there. Anything else you're interested in seeing? Any questions about anything? Was this helpful to what we've done with this lecture series, to kind of give you a picture, view of these sites and tell you a little bit about the history of them? I hope it's been helpful and gives you, sparks your interest, perhaps to be motivated and blessed to go there yourself sometime, if you haven't already. Anything else? Okay, why don't we close with a prayer? In the name of Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Lord and Master of my life, take from me the spirit of sloth, faint-heartedness, lust of power, and idle talk, but rather give to me your servant a spirit of chastity, humility, patience, and love. Yes, O Lord and King, grant me to see my own faults and not to judge my brother or sister. You are holy, always now and forever, to the ages of ages. Amen.